Imagine waking up to find your entire life trending, not because of a career achievement, but because of heartbreak. That's the reality Rasheeda Frost faced. The internet erupted with judgment, hashtags, and hot takes after rumors of Kirk Frost's infidelity exploded into the spotlight again. But this time, instead of walking away like everyone expected, Rasheeda chose a different path. And now she's finally telling her side of the story. Raw, emotional, and absolutely jaw-dropping. What makes a woman stay when the world says, go? What happens when loyalty becomes controversial? Rasheeda isn't just clapping back, she's opening up about the love, the lies, the legacy, and the lessons. In a world obsessed with throwing stones, she's building her peace brick by brick. This isn't just a story of betrayal, it's a masterclass in resilience. Get ready, because once you read this, you won't see her the same again. Hashtag Rasheeda Speaks, hashtag Kirk Frost, hashtag I am human too, hashtag Unfiltered Love, hashtag LHHATL. At Rasheeda at Frost117. When everything came out, Kirk's affair, Jasmine, Cannon, all of it, my mind went completely blank. People think what they see on TV is the whole story, but the truth goes way deeper. I remember being completely silent in that moment. People were tagging me on Instagram at Rasheeda, you deserve better, sis. Leave him. Hashtag team RASHEEDA, always. But the only question in my head was, what am I going to tell my kids? I was angry. I was hurt. But more than anything, I was confused. My relationship with Kirk wasn't just husband and wife, it was business too. We built at Pressed ATL together, grew D-Lo Entertainment, and built a family. I couldn't just walk away from all that just because people said I should. I needed to make my own decision. Every day there were new memes, new blogs. Rasheeda, the doormat, Kirk got away again. When you're in the public eye, even your pain becomes a meme. But no one stopped to think that I'm human too. I cry, I break. I grieve silently while everyone else tweets and jokes. My entire life, my family, my name reduced to gossip content. But I'm not just a reality star. I'm a woman, a mother, a business owner, a wife, and whether people love it or not, that means something. I've worked too hard to let the internet define my worth. I had to center myself in the truth, not the noise. That truth was messy. It was painful, but it was mine. At that time, I went to my mom. She told me one thing, baby, either you burn in this fire or you use it to light your way. That's when I knew I had to find my own answer. I started talking to my heart. Not Twitter, not Instagram. It's just my own heart. And my heart didn't scream. It whispered. It said, take your time. Feel everything. Don't rush a single emotion. At KirkFrost117, apologize to me. Not for TV, not for the cameras. It's in real life. Eyes held shame, guilt, and most importantly, a desire to change. I didn't know if I could forgive him, but I started to listen. Every night we sat down and talked. We argued, we cried, we unpacked trauma from years back. It wasn't just about this affair. It was about everything we ignored along the way. The silence, the disconnection, the distractions. We stopped pretending. Everything was fine. We started breaking it down piece by piece. Sometimes love is not just romance, it's accountability. Kirk had to sit in that discomfort. I didn't make it easy. Wasn't supposed to. I'm not a saint, but I am. A woman who knows what she's worth. People said I was weak, that I lost my self-respect, that I should be an example by walking away. But nobody lives in my shoes. Nobody shares my history. Nobody built what I built with him. I wasn't choosing him over myself. I was choosing to explore healing in my own way. On my own timeline, my DMs were brutal. He'll do it again. You're embarrassing. You're stuck. But those same people were following, watching, judging, addicted to the story. I was content. I was chaos. I was clickbait. But what they didn't see was the work, the therapy, reflection, The real nights when I had to stare in the mirror and ask, do you still love him? Do you still love you? And I did. I loved me enough to do what felt right for me, not for the blogs, not for VH1, not for anybody but myself. I began to forgive not blindly, but intentionally. Kirk began to change not perfectly, but consistently. That's what made it real. I'm not telling this story to gain sympathy. I'm telling it because someone needs to hear it. Someone who's quietly crying at 3 a.m. with a broken heart and no applause. Someone who's tired of pretending. Someone who knows it's complicated but still believes in second chances. I'm not with Kirk because I forgot the betrayal. I'm with him because I remembered the foundation. And I wanted to see if it could be rebuilt. I'm still building #I am human too. #unfiltered love. #RASHEED. A speaks #healing in public. #messy but real at Rasheeda. At Frost117 #Black Love Matters, #LHHATL, #PrestaTL, #Emotional Growth, #From the Heart, #Team RASHEEDA. E-lead, A healing didn't happen overnight. In fact, some days it didn't happen at all. There were mornings I would wake up, look at Kirk and feel nothing but resentment. Other days, I'd look at him and remember the boy I fell in love with. That conflict within me, that back and forth was constant. I had to learn to stop trying to silence it. I had to allow myself to feel it all, even when it made me uncomfortable. At RASHEEDA has never been the girl who puts on a smile just for the camera. I've always kept it real, so why should this be any different? I didn't want to sell anyone a fantasy. I didn't want to be anyone's perfect wife prototype. I wanted to be honest about the fact that rebuilding trust is ugly. It's slow, it's hard, and it doesn't come with guarantees. There were times when I would leave the house just to get away from the noise in my own head. I'd drive for hours, no destination, just me and the music. Sometimes I'd end up parked outside at Pressed ATL, just staring at the storefront, reminding myself that I built something powerful with or without Kirk. I reminded myself I still had value even if my marriage didn't survive. But he showed up for me in ways he hadn't before. He started going to therapy, not just couple sessions, but solo ones. He stopped blaming everything on stress and actually sat with his own patterns. And I saw growth, real growth. Not performative, not Instagram deep. It's the kind that happens in silence when nobody's watching. The hardest part wasn't even forgiving him. It was forgiving myself. For ignoring the signs, for staying silent when I should have spoken up, for putting our image ahead of my inner peace. That's where the healing had to begin, not between us, but within me. I journaled daily. I cried into my pillow like I was 17 again. I stopped sugarcoating my emotions. And the deeper I went into my own healing, the more I started seeing things clearly. Not just about him, but about me. I was raised to be strong, independent, unbreakable, but nobody taught me how to be soft with myself. How to admit I was hurting. How to say I don't know what to do. People on the outside still didn't get it. They assumed I was being manipulated, or worse, that I was desperate. Let them think that. Let them talk. The truth was, I was doing the bravest thing I'd ever done, choosing to stay when walking. Away would have been easier. I'm not glorifying staying through betrayal. I'm glorifying doing the work. For some women, leaving is the most powerful choice. For others, it's staying and rewriting the story. I chose the latter. And every day, I choose it again. Not because it's simple, but because it's worth it. For me, one night we sat on the porch together. No cameras, no producers, just us. Kirk looked at me and said, I know I broke everything. And if you walk away tomorrow, I'll still be proud that you stood tall through all of it. That was the first time I truly believed he understood the damage he'd done. That he wasn't just sorry, He was changed. Changed. That night, I realized something else. I wasn't rebuilding the old relationship. I was creating a new one. One with more honesty, more boundaries, more truth. We weren't the same people we were before. And maybe that was the point. There are still triggers. There are still moments when I question everything. But I also see the love in how he parents our kids. I see the effort in how he shows up. I see the respect in how he speaks to me now. And most importantly, see the reflection of my own growth. To the women reading this, the ones being judged for staying, or leaving, or even just not knowing, I see you. I've been you. I want you to know that your choice is valid. Your pain is valid, and you're healing. That's yours to define. #healing journey, #real marriage, #black love unfiltered. #growth takes time at Rasheeda at Frost117. #emotional maturity, #UNLEARNING, and relearning #still standing, #team RASHEEDA, #LHHATL by the time the dust started to settle. I was no longer the same Rasheeda who had stood quietly while the world threw opinions at my life. I had changed not because I wanted to prove anything, but because going through fire either hardens you or purifies you. And I chose the latter. Every phone call I ignored, every tweet I scrolled past, every harsh DM that I didn't respond to, it all became white noise. I had found my focus again, but clarity doesn't mean everything magically heals. It means I could finally see the broken pieces clearly enough to figure out how to put them back together, or decide if I even wanted to. And with @KirkFrost117, that decision had to be made daily. Healing wasn't just between us anymore. Involved our kids, our extended families, our businesses. Even at Pressed ATL had felt the ripple effect of our personal drama. There were customers who stopped showing up, friends who backed away, business relationships that suddenly went cold. Being in the public eye means your personal becomes professional, whether you like it or not. I had to sit down with my team and have honest conversations. Not just about what was next for the brand, but what was next for me. I told them plainly, I need space. Not a break, not a rebrand, but space to find Rasheeda the woman, not just Rasheeda the brand. And you know what shocked me? They understood. They supported me. They lifted me. And that's something I'll never forget. During that time, I leaned into my faith like never before. Not just the faith in God, but faith in myself. Faith in timing. Faith in the idea that even broken things can still be used for something beautiful. My prayers weren't always pretty. Sometimes they were just me crying, sometimes just silence. But they were real. Meanwhile, Kirk was doing his own work. He was keeping his distance when I needed it, showing up when I didn't ask, and learning to sit in the discomfort of not being the hero in our story. That's when I knew he was serious. Not because he bought me gifts or made grand gestures, but because he stayed consistent even when there was no applause. No reality show scene, just real life. People love to see a comeback, but what they don't see is what happens behind closed doors. Like the night I woke up from a nightmare, heart racing, reliving the betrayal all over again. Kirk didn't try to explain it away. He didn't say, that was months ago. He just sat up, held my hand and said, I know, I'm here. Sometimes that's all you need. Trust isn't rebuilt in promises. It's rebuilt in moments like that. One of the biggest turning points came when I realized I wasn't waiting for the old Kirk to come back. I was learning who the new Kirk was. And maybe I was learning who the new Rasheeda was too. Our dynamic had changed, yes, but maybe it needed to. Maybe the way we used to love wasn't sustainable for who we were now, and that's okay. There were things I started doing just for me again. Long walks, solo spa days, saying no without guilt. Laughing without checking if he was in a good mood. I reclaimed my joy in small, quiet ways, and Kirk never stood in the way. He encouraged it, even when it hurt him, 'cause healing isn't always comfortable for either person. I started sharing my journey with close friends. Some were supportive, others were skeptical, and that's okay too. Everyone has their own lens, but I stopped letting other people's opinions dictate how I saw my own life. Their stories aren't mine. Their pain isn't mine. And their healing path won't look like mine either. At Rasheeda isn't a doormat. She's a damn fighter. And choosing to stay and work through pain that takes strength most people will never understand. You don't have to agree with it, but you better respect it now. Months later, our home feels different. Not perfect, not filtered, but peaceful. The kind of peace that comes after a storm, not because the storm didn't shake everything up, but because you found a new foundation. Our conversations are deeper, our laughs are louder, and our silences are more comfortable. There's still work to do. There always will be, but we're doing it together. To anyone reading this who's in a place of indecision, whether it's about your relationship, your career, or even your own identity, want to remind you, you are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to take your time, and you are allowed to love. Even after heartbreak, #resilience and love, #new beginnings, #healing takes time. The real RASHEEDA at Rasheeda at Frost 117. Love without filters, second chances. LHHATL, pressed ATL, growth is MIND set hashtag. This is my truth. Healing wasn't linear, it was more like waves, unpredictable and sometimes crushing. There were days I woke up with clarity and purpose, ready to move forward with grace. And there were nights I cried into my pillow because a random song or smell triggered a memory I wasn't prepared to face. At Rasheeda isn't immune to pain just because she's built an empire. If anything, success sometimes magnifies the loneliness. Everyone assumes you're fine, that you have it all together. But behind the filters, behind the glam, I was rebuilding my soul one tear at a time. Kirk was trying, I could see that. And honestly, some days I didn't want to see it. I wanted to hold on to the anger because it felt like power. Letting go felt like surrender. But my heart, it kept whispering, "You're tired of fighting." And it was right. Fighting with him. Fighting with myself, fighting with everyone else's expectations. I was exhausted. So one morning over coffee, I said, let's stop pretending we're okay. Let's be real. And for the first time in a long time, we both just sat in the silence without reaching for phones or fake smiles. That silence was heavy. But it was honest. I started journaling again. Pages filled with truth, frustration, love, doubt, fear, all of it. I didn't write for anyone else, not for the brand, not for the fans, just for me. Those pages became my safe space. It's a place to scream without making noise. It's to say the things I wasn't ready to say out loud. And you know what I realized? Wasn't broken. I was transforming. Transformation is messy. It requires shedding parts of you that you once needed for survival. For me, that meant no longer needing to control every detail. No longer proving my strength by how much pain I could endure. Real strength, I've learned, is knowing when to rest. When to say no. When to say, I'm not okay today. Kirk. And I had more conversations, real ones. Not the rehearsed kind you do for cameras. We talked about our childhoods, our fears, our patterns. He told me things I had never heard him say before, things about his own insecurities, his shame, his longing to be better, not just for me, but for himself. And I listened, really listened. Not to respond, but to understand. One night we sat in the backyard, just the two of us, under string lights and a sky full of stars. He reached for my hand and said, I know I hurt you, and I'll spend every day earning your trust back. But I want us to find joy again, not just peace. That hit me, because peace was survival. Joy was living again. We started doing little things together, cooking dinner, watching old movies, taking walks, relearning each other's rhythms. And I'll admit, I was scared. Scared of falling back into old patterns. But something had shifted. We weren't trying to fix the past. We were building something new, something more honest. I shared this journey in bits on @Rasheeda and got DMs from women all over the world. Women who had stayed, women who had left, women still deciding. And every single one of them deserved love, deserved grace, deserved to be heard. That's why I keep speaking up, not for attention, but because silence helps no one, and vulnerability. That's the real power. Real power. Therapy helped too. We went together and separately. It wasn't easy. There were hard truths, ugly cries, defensive walls. But over time, the walls started to lower. And behind them, we saw each other not as enemies or even partners, but as two flawed humans trying to do better. Some people say once trust is broken, it can never be repaired. But I disagree. Trust, like love, is a choice, a daily one. And I was choosing to trust the process, to trust myself, to trust that even if we didn't end up forever, the work wasn't wasted. I poured that energy into @Pressed ATL too, rebranding not just the look, but the soul of the business. I hired more women who had stories like mine, gave them space to lead, to shine. We launched a campaign called #FromPain2Power, and the response was overwhelming. We weren't just selling fashion, we were creating space for healing. Now, when I look at Kirk, I don't see the man who broke me. I see the man who stood in the fire and didn't run, who took accountability, who stayed when it wasn't easy, who let me rebuild on my terms. And when he looks at me, I think he finally sees all of me, not just the strong Rasheeda, but the scared, the soft, the healing version too. We still have work to do, but we're doing it. And most importantly, we're doing it without the need to prove anything to anyone else. This journey isn't about public validation, it's about private truth. To the women reading this, your story is valid, your pain is real, and your healing, it's yours alone. Take your time, own your voice, and remember, love, real love starts with you. #Healing in public, #FromPain2Power, #Unbreakable-Woman, #Trust the process, #RASHEEDA Unfiltered @Rasheeda. @Frost117, Growth Season, #LHHATL, Redefining Love, #PressedATL Strong, Emotional Comeback, Faith and Forgiveness. The hardest thing to admit wasn't that I had been hurt, was that I had allowed myself to keep getting hurt. Over and over, quietly, with a smile for the world. That's what strength had always looked like to me. Silence, endurance, putting on a face, and getting back to work. But now, strength looked different. Strength looked like saying, I'm not okay, and sitting with the discomfort until I could breathe again. I stopped being afraid of looking weak, because, honestly, what's weaker than hiding from your own truth? I remember one night I had just finished a press event and came home feeling emotionally drained. Kirk was already there, sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone. I walked past him straight to our bedroom. 5 minutes later, he followed, quietly, and just sat at the foot of the bed. No words, no excuses. Just presence. That's when I realized we were learning how to just be together again. Without the chaos, it's not that everything had magically become perfect. In fact, the more we healed, the more we uncovered. Layers and layers of suppressed anger, fear, disappointments. But also layers of history, friendship, loyalty. This wasn't just a marriage, it was a lifetime of shared hustle, love, and evolution. We had built empires together and torn each other down in private. Now it was time to build again, this time from a foundation of truth. I started opening up more on @Rasheeda about the ups and downs. Not the scripted TV version, but the real stuff. I posted a caption that read, "Healing doesn't mean you forget. It means you choose peace anyway." And the comments. Thousands, women from every walk of life saying they felt seen. that they were tired of pretending too. That they needed to know someone like me had cracks and was still standing. At Frost 117. Wasn't perfect, but neither was I. I think that's the part we both finally understood. We stopped trying to win arguments. We started trying to win each other's trust again. And that meant humbling ourselves. That meant listening to pain we caused, even when it was uncomfortable. That meant being okay with not having quick fixes. One moment that changed everything. We went to a couples retreat in Savannah. No cameras, no stylists, just us. Stripped down emotionally and physically, no makeup, no walls. One night around the campfire, everyone had to share a moment they regretted most. Kirk looked at me and said, "I regret every time I made you doubt your worth. I regret making you question if you were enough." And I cried. Not the cute single tear kind, the ugly, messy, solemting kind. Because for so long I had wanted him to say that. Not in defense, not in damage controls, just raw truth. And he did. After that, something inside me softened. Because everything was fixed. But because finally, I didn't feel alone in the pain. We started using small check-ins at home, 10-minute honesty talks before bed. Sometimes they were light. Sometimes they were deep. But they became our ritual. Our way of not letting silence become resentment again. We also started showing up for each other's passions more. I surprised him at his studio one day with lunch, okay? He joined me at Pressed ATL launch and just stood proudly beside me, not trying to lead, not trying to overshadow, just support. That mattered more than any grand gesture. Real love shows up quietly, but consistently. I got messages saying, "Girl, you're better than me, and I would have left the first time." And to be honest, I don't blame them. There were times I judged myself too. But healing isn't linear, it's personal. And it's okay to write your own rules as long as your peace is protected. We even talk to our kids more openly about love, about mistakes, about redemption. I wanted them to know that people aren't just good or bad, they're growing. And relationships are built, not gifted. I think that's one of the most powerful legacies we can leave as parents, emotional truth. And through all of this, kept growing too. I took more time for my self-spa days without guilt, reading again, morning walks just to clear my mind. I stopped treating self-care like a reward and started treating it like a responsibility. Because when I'm full, I have more to give from, a place of abundance, not depletion. Sometimes people will ask, "Are y'all really okay now?" And the truth is, we're better than we've ever been. 'Cause now we're honest. Now we show up for each other in real ways. Now we know how to fall apart and rebuild. And if tomorrow everything were to fall again, I'd know I gave it everything. That I didn't walk away from fear, but stayed from strength. So to every woman reading this who's trying to decide what healing looks like for her, start where you are. Cry if you need to. Walk away if you must. Stay if your heart says stay. But whatever you do, make sure it's your voice leading the way, not the noise around you. You owe that to yourself. #RASHEED, a real talk. #healing is messy. #love after pain. #strength looks different. #emotional reset. #LHHATL. #redemption journey. #pressed ATL. #honest marriage. #vulnerability is power. At Rasheeda at Frost 117 #women who heal. #power in transparency. #from pain tubes. #legacy of love. There's a certain freedom that comes when you stop needing to explain your healing to everyone else. I used to think I owed the world a justification for my choices. I thought I had to prove my worth by either walking away with pride or staying with some grand speech. But now, I realize peace doesn't need applause, growth doesn't need permission, and forgiveness, especially the kind that leads to your own peace, doesn't always look neat and packaged. When I looked in the mirror one morning, fresh-faced, no glam, just me, I saw someone I had worked hard to rebuild. And I wasn't rebuilding for anyone but myself. Not for the fans, not for the show, Not even for Kirk, for me. Because I deserved to feel whole, regardless of how the world categorized my worth. That day, I posted a video on @Rasheeda. No filter, no music, just me talking. I don't know who needs to hear this, I said, but your healing is valid even if it's quiet, even if no one understands it but you. And the DMs flooded in. Survivors, wives, husbands, daughters, sons, everyone who had ever been made to feel like their emotions were too much or too complicated. And we built something in that moment. A digital sanctuary for the messy, unfiltered, quiet revolution of healing. At Frost 117, and I had started doing date nights again. Not the flashy post-tinogram kind. I'm talking real connection. No phones, no distractions. It's just questions like, what's something you're scared to tell me? And what does love feel like to you now? That intimacy was more powerful than any trip or gift. And speaking of intimacy, let's talk about it. Because for so long after the betrayal, my body didn't feel like mine. I didn't feel safe, not even with him. That's a truth many don't speak about. Betrayal robs more than trust. It robs touch, closeness, softness. But through therapy, journaling, even prayer, I started reclaiming my own sensuality. Not for him, for me. Started wearing things that made me feel good again. Dancing in the mirror again. Lighting candles. Not for ambiance, but for intention. That's what healing looked like. RECONNECTION. We began attending a relationship therapist twice a month. Not because things were bad again, but because we wanted to stay aligned. I told Frost 117, we tune up our cars. Why not our hearts? And he agreed. It's wild how many people think counseling is a sign of weakness. For us, it became our armor. People still judged, still posted slick comments, still speculated that we were faking it for the show, for business, for whatever narrative made sense to them. And maybe before, those opinions would have shaken me. But now, I scrolled past with a soft heart and a stronger spine. Let them talk. They don't know the prayers we whispered at night, the tears we wiped in silence, the journals we filled, the late-night laughs we shared after years of tension. This wasn't about convincing the world we were okay. This was about choosing each other every single day. And more importantly, choosing ourselves first so we could meet each other whole. I got real with my circle too. No more keeping friendships that were built on gossip or competition. I only made space for people who rooted for my healing, who held space for my truth, who didn't reduce me to a storyline. That meant a smaller circle, so be it. My peace became expensive, and I stopped letting cheap energy rent space in my life. The kids, they saw the shift. Not just between me and Kirk, but in the home overall. Less yelling, more check-ins, more, how is your heart today? Instead of just, how was school? And I saw them start to model emotional honesty too. That made me prouder than anything else. Generational healing, that's the legacy. I remember one night sitting on the porch with a glass of wine, Kirk beside me. We weren't saying much, just watching the sky. And he said, I never knew I could love you better than I did before, but I do now. That's when I knew. We had evolved not into perfection, but into something real, something raw, something resilient. And if you're reading this, hoping for a final chapter, let me tell you something, there is none. Healing is ongoing. Love is a daily decision. Trust is built in layers, not leaps. But peace is always worth the process. So to everyone out there navigating betrayal, heartbreak, confusion, know this. You are not broken. You are becoming. And you get to write your own version of survival. I did. And I'm still writing it. One day at a time. #RASHEED I heals. #chapter 6. #still becoming. #real love evolves. #LHHATL. #WOMENS voices matter. Hashtag emotional recovery. Hashtag forgiveness is freedom. Hashtag reclaim your peace. Hashtag married and healing. Hashtag therapy is powerful. Hashtag spiritual growth. Hashtag no more pretending. Hashtag Rasheeda and Kirk. Hashtag legacy of healing. Hashtag Rasheeda unfiltered at Rasheeda, at Frost117, at VH1. Hashtag love after reality TV. Hashtag healing out loud. Hashtag your journey is valid. If this story touched you, don't just scroll speak. Share your truth in the comments. Tag someone who needs to hear this. Let's build a space where healing is loud, love is real, and nobody walks alone. At Rasheeda, at Frost117, at VH1. Hashtag healing together. Hashtag share your story. Hashtag Rasheeda unfiltered. Hashtag emotional truths. Hashtag love after pain. Hashtag real talk with Rasheeda. Would you like a version specifically tailored for Instagram caption YouTube video? Outro podcast style closer. Let me know and I'll adapt it.